For as much as the conception of Star Wars was it being on the big screen, a real cinematic experience, I've always felt that Star Wars lends itself best to video games. I love all Star Wars, the shows, the movies, well most of them anyway, and in particular the games. The galaxy, the characters, the experience, the music, I can't help but think it lends itself best to the world and experience of gaming. Growing up in the early 2000s, I was given this abundance of Star Wars games to enjoy. The Battlefront series, Empire at War, the movie tie-ins to even like spin-offs from the Clone Wars show, or to the insane but insanely fun Force Unleashed games. The ability to explore the characters and themes and feel immersed in the battles and these moments and spectacles. I will never forget, despite how stupid it was, pulling down an Imperial Star Destroyer as Starkiller. I will never forget the ridiculous shenanigans that were created in Galactic Conquest in Battlefront. I want Star Wars to thrive across all media, but right now, on the video game front, the property is just being mishandled on this gigantic level that would allow this IP to flourish, for fans to connect, and for those to reignite the feeling that maybe some have lost over the years. Here's why we are far, far away from Star Wars being done right in video games. First of all, we've got to address the rather loud and noisy elephant in the room, a disturbance in the Force, if you will. The cancellations. We have suffered over the years. Now, I could go back as far as KOTOR 3, Battlefront 3, Imperial Commando, but that was all pre-Disney, and I think it's just pretty unnecessary to go that far back, right? But when we've lost Star Wars 1313, Amy Hennig's Project Ragtag, and now Respawn's FPS shooter, rumoured to be a first-person Mandalorian game. You then add to that the uncertainty around the KOTOR remake, the rumoured tough situation at Quantic Dream, the team working on Star Wars Eclipse, and man, what a mess. How can an IP so big that means so much to so many people be mismanaged this hard on the video game front? What is it with cancelling Bounty Hunter games too? 1313 was supposed to be following Boba Fett in the dark underworld of Coruscant. EA's Respawn FPS was meant to be taking on bounties before setting off across the universe with this fast-paced gameplay, which is trademark Respawn entertainment. We've even had staff come out and say how great this one was looking. For as much as me personally, I come to Star Wars for the Battle of the Jedi against the Sith and the cool crews and planets and all that, there's so much more to Star Wars. I don't just want lightsaber and force orientated games. I look over to Marvel games, right, and they've got it down to a T, pairing studios to IP that synergizes well. You got Spider-Man with its fast and fluid traversal paired with Insomniac, Midnight Suns, a tactical game paired with Firaxis, and whilst not commercially a success, I loved it, as did many. EA Motive being tasked with an Iron Man game, Blade being paired with Arcane. All these pairings make complete sense. Now, to Lucasfilm's credit, the EA exclusivity label only expired last year, which, what a dumb decision it was to have that in the first place. We've had some cool announcements that make sense too. You got the soon to release Star Wars Outlaws developed by Ubisoft Massive, which I can't wait for. Giving Amy Hennig another shot at a Star Wars game with Skydance, and then you got Quantic Dreams building a narrative adventure. All these make sense, cool. But there's still so much lacking in the Star Wars universe when it comes to video games. I cannot believe, with how hot the Mandalorian IP is, EA decided it was not viable to proceed with development. More on that later though. Also, look, I know that when people hear the words live service in a sentence, they shit themselves and they write a game off. But how is there not an ongoing Star Wars game outside of Star Wars The Old Republic? Successful live service games are extremely difficult to create, for as much as they are what every executive and shareholder desires. For every successful one, there's a dozen that fail, sure. But then I look at something like Helldivers and I think, this is just Galactic Conquest on another level with a master dev deciding the rules of engagement. How hasn't a new Battlefront or even just first person shooter in the Star Wars universe been created with this kind of idea. For me, there should always be a multiplayer Star Wars game around. DICE's Battlefront 2 stopped support in 2020. For me, support ended way too soon on that one, and yeah, I know that there's this Star Wars Hunters on the horizon for its 1.0 release, but I'm not after a free-to-play mobile and Switch game. One of the favourite parts of DICE's Battlefront 2 was its co-op mode. And then, I look at Bad Batch, I look at Republic Commando, I look at The Mandalorian, and I think, there's so much potential here, and it is not being tapped into. Or at least that we don't know of. Instead, I sit here, knowing a Mandalorian game has been cancelled, KOTOR, one of the greatest RPGs ever made, forget Star Wars games, might not even get a deserving remake. Star Wars Eclipse, I mean, who knows what's going to go on with that one. And it sounds like Amy Hennig's studio is going to have their Marvel game before their Star Wars one. Star Wars video games deserve better. I look at the success of Respawns Jedi games and how popular Cal, BD1 and other characters have become. To the point where the Kenobi show discussion was, is Cal Kestis going to show up at all? That's the power that Star Wars games can have. Last year, personally, I got to tick off a big Star Wars bucket list. I went to Star Wars Celebration in London for 3 days, I got to go to Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, and I got to visit big parts of Star Wars history in Hollywood. I know that not everyone loves the Disney era of Star Wars, but I think Season 7 of Clone Wars, the Jedi games, Mandalorian Season 1 and 2 in particular, flashes in Bad Batch, Rebels, and of course Andor, show there is so much to this universe that is just untapped in the video game world. So, what next then? I honestly don't know. Looking ahead, we've got the likely final installment of the Jedi series, Star Wars Outlaws by Massive, Eclipse by Quantic, the strategy game by BitReactor, the KOTOR remake if it's alive, and then Amy Hennig's game. The worst part though is, let's say that Mandalorian game was the only first person shooter or Mandalorian game in development on that front, right? With the timeline it takes to get games made in, let's say a new one was greenlit today. You are talking 2028 or 2029 at the absolute earliest. I believe Disney said they wanted a new Star Wars game every year, right? And I love that cadence, but I want a variety of experiences. A new Battlefront set during the old or High Republic in the frame of Helldivers, a tactical shooter as a spiritual successor to Republic Commando. We've got a strategy game on the horizon, sure, but a hack and slash game with Final Fantasy 16, Devil May Cry, Saber Combat, and there's still so much more. The Star Wars universe is so big and so wide, I don't want everything set between 3 and 4. That's why when we found out the Star Wars Outlaws is set between 5 and 6, I was like, yes! More of that, please. I want to go back to my live service point, right? I gravitate towards looter shooter games. Now, hear me out. I don't want a looter. But a live service game makes sense in this universe. I think the Old Republic actually has some outstanding storytelling moments. But going back to it now, it still feels clunky. It has the right idea though, with the Old Republic. The original trilogy, the prequels, there's such little wiggle room to maneuver to make something big or interesting and compelling. Whatever the idea would be, Mandalorians, Jedi, Sith, whatever, set it elsewhere, whether that be in another era or another galaxy entirely. Live service itself doesn't ultimately suck. It only sucks when the entire brand is ultimately live service. It goes back to what I said about Marvel games, right? Matching the right studio with the right property. Like, you wouldn't want to match Larian Studios behind Baldur's Gate 3 with a hack and slash third person brawler. But they'd make sense for a Star Wars RPG. In the same vein that KOTOR remake is exactly what you're looking for when you see the Final Fantasy VII remake and rebirth games. Now, those studios are 99.9% off the table. But you get the idea. I refuse to believe that the Star Wars IP is not an aspirational one that devs want to work on. My overall worry though is that not just Star Wars but Disney's IP in general, the licensing fee that they asked for. From the unfortunate leaks at Insomniac, it was revealed just how substantial a cut that can be. when they asked for it. That's maybe why the Mandalorian game got cancelled, because EA decided that licensing fee was going to be too much to make it worthwhile. If we want a golden era of licensed game alongside the thriving IP of the Elden Rings and The Last of Us, those licensing fees probably need to be brought down to make it a possibility. Star Wars is absolutely about the big screen immersion, but it lends itself to video games on many fronts too. Spending a longer period of time with your crew, exploring entire planets that may only flash up for 5 minutes in a film or show, becoming the protagonist, a mercenary, a Jedi, a trooper, grants you a different level of immersion. Like, I could go on all day. The moments in Andor at times, like this morally grey area, imagine that in an RPG where those choices really matter. I worry with the way things are heading, the video game aspect of this franchise might become redundant without the care it deserves. Listen, like I say, I could bang on all day about Star Wars games, but what are your thoughts on the state of Star Wars games right now? Which game cancellation has been the most disappointing one for you? What game would you love to see? Do you have a developer that you'd love to see paired with a Star Wars IP? I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Honestly, I just love talking about things I'm passionate about here, and Star Wars will always be one of them, so if you enjoy that or you're looking to stay up to date on the latest across all sectors of Star Wars video games, you're probably going to want to hit that subscribe button. Dropping a like on the video also helps me out a lot, and I would be massively appreciative of it. You would do me a solid. Have a terrific day, and I'll catch you in the next one.